Good afternoon, all. And my video today is about social interaction as a part of my Autism Spectrum Disorder diagnosis by Dr. Michael Hoffmann, MD, in the University of South Florida, and my inability to make friends throughout my life or go out and engage in social interaction, and not being able to fit in like a neurotypical. And the thing is that I don't just suddenly become neurotypical and have friends and be great at social interaction like a neurotypical just because I file a court case or I get sued by someone in a court case or I file a Social Security claim. Those events do not turn me into a neurotypical. And why all these judges somehow think it does, it's like beyond me. It's kind of absurd and ridiculous and irrational. And so one of the things I want to do is start with this Social Security administrative law judge, and here's what she said. She said, with respect to social anxiety and autism spectrum disorder, I could not find evidence of any mental health treatment contemporaneous with her application for SSI. She doesn't mention the SSDI, of course, or through the present. Additionally, I reviewed the historical records and could not find evidence to establish the existence of social anxiety or autism spectrum disorder. First of all, I never said anything to this judge about having social anxiety that would be separate from being autistic and having an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. So where she cooked that one up from, I don't know. But I do have to say that recently I watched a great YouTube video by an autism expert doctor, and I learned something from that video. This doctor was talking in part about how do you know if a doctor or psychologist or psychiatrist is an expert in the female presentation of autism spectrum disorder. And she started going through it, and she even said things like, well, they may advertise on their website, they diagnose adults with autism spectrum disorders. And that when she's called some of these doctors, she's found out they only hope to get that kind of business. They've never diagnosed any autistic adult with ASD, so you can't go by the websites. And then she said, you also have to make sure that the doctor holding themselves out as being able to diagnose ASD has expertise in the female presentation of ASD. And not only that, has experience in the different age groups of the female presentation of ASD. In other words, it might not be sufficient to have diagnosed some females with ASD in the 20 to 30 age range when they're being asked to assess a woman for ASD in the 50 to 60 year age range. So I was listening to this video, and the most important point this doctor, who is an autism expert, said is, when you get these doctors, psychologists, lawyers, judges who say, you don't have autism, I don't see any autism, what you have to do is you have to start asking them questions how did you apply diagnostic criterion A? How did you apply this diagnostic criterion to me? Because if they don't have any specific autism spectrum disorder educational training or experience, when you ask them that question, they won't be able to answer it, and they'll just go, and their brain will short circuit. Well, that's obviously what would happen had I been allowed to be present at my own hearing with the Social Security ALJ who said these things about me. But okay, let's talk about the medical records. First of all, as I said in other videos, I have emails from Dr. Michael Hoffmann that is talking about his giving me and scoring the ADIR gold standard autism diagnostic test. So it's clear to the ALJ that there was a diagnostic test that's valid. That was the basis on which Dr. Hoffmann made my autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. And that he, in his own words, called it a, quote, autism diagnosis, end quote. But in addition to that, I found out the Social Security ALJ was required to address other symptoms that other doctors making other type of diagnoses have said about me or have spotted or have found, because you can't even just say I don't meet the listing for adult ASD, which I did, but she has to determine if I equal that listing. And because of the female presentation of autism and the number of misdiagnoses, which this is even mentioned in the DSM-5, because certainly, although I don't have a copy of the DSM-5, I saw it in the discussion that I'm Autistic Now What said in one of her videos that yes, they have to consider the misdiagnoses. They also have to consider masking. Well, this ALJ didn't consider any of those things, but let's talk about her zeroing in on social anxiety that I never claimed and on my ASD. First of all, I had a medical report by Bruce Jenner, PhD, in which he basically said, I don't hear anything about her friends, her family, her relatives, any social life or anything like that, and that's very troubling. Okay, so there is a medical symptom being noticed of a social interaction, social communication problem, number one. Number two, Dr. Castle, PhD, gave me psychological testing. And one of his major comments was that with one of the tests he gave me, I could not put social stories together. I could not take what someone was doing and make a social story out of it because I couldn't recognize the social interaction parts of what they were doing to put together a social story or narrative of what they were doing in a social interaction sense or conclusion. So there's number two. Those were in my medical records. And number three is, in one of Dr. Hoffmann's emails he sent me, he had given me an EQ test, and he commented about it that my social scores were very low and very concerning. Well, there's number three. So how can this ALJ say I don't find any evidence of this in the history of her records? In addition, she skipped over the fact that Dr. Volbracht, MD, made a finding that I have widespread eyes. Well, how does that happen? Oh, in the first trimester of pregnancy of my mother, when the neural crest cells were developing, the amygdala grows too big, too fast. Enlarged amygdala, which is commonly seen in ASD, and it makes the eyes go wider in the first trimester of pregnancy. But also, I've posted on my channel pictures of me at around age 3-4 with a large head, which is very typical of ASD. So there were definitely plenty of medical records and signs and physical signs there for this ALJ judge to start to identify that, yes, I not only have an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, but I show the signs and symptoms of being autistic. Well, obviously there's more diagnostic criterion, and those are met in the various symptoms that doctors have described about me. But let's get back to this social interaction and social communication and relationships and friends component. Well, Dr. Hoffmann, during the ADIR, took a childhood history of me. That's something no judge whatsoever has done. The Social Security ALJ never did. And none of the doctors until Dr. Hoffmann did. Or at least they certainly didn't ask the right questions in the case of Erwin Feinberg, MD. He did not have any background in diagnosing the female presentation of ASD, and he did not ask the right questions, and he blew off several times, he was told, about some of my childhood autistic traits. So let's talk about my social interaction and friendships and relationships. Well, from my earliest photographs and my earliest memories, besides, you can see one of my other previous videos about my oversensory to foods, to tastes, to textures, and my mom trying to feed me in a high chair and me not gonna eat that. No. And I wouldn't open my mouth. Well, that continued. That was only the start. And every time something was too loud, I'd go like this, or I'd run out of the room. And from the earliest, there are pictures of me with my cousins, Kim and Jimmy, over at my father's mother's house, my grandmother, Gigi. And Kim and Jimmy are playing, and they're playing with each other, and I'm not playing with them, and I'm not interacting with them, and I'm off in my own world, doing things like playing with balloons by myself, or where my horse obsession started, my special interest, sitting on a rocking horse, rocking and rocking, because I was sensory seeking. And then you see all sorts of pictures and photographs, just hundreds of them through my childhood, my young childhood, where I'm off in my own world playing with objects, etch-a-sketches, books upside down, plastic horses, just all sorts of objects, and I'm not interacting with any other adults or children in the room. So you've got many pictures of that going on. I don't think I have one single picture of my mother or father ever hugging me or kissing me. And I certainly don't remember them ever doing that except for 2 times. One was when my father thought he was getting rid of me for good. And that was in 1983. And after I had been raped, I ran away and took off to the East Coast. And that's the only time my father ever clumsily hugged me and said goodbye. I don't remember any other one single time he ever hugged me, and he certainly never kissed me that I can remember. I am aware that he carried me places when I was an infant, but he wasn't hugging me. He wasn't kissing me. And there wasn't any social interaction between him and me. And likewise, no pictures of my mother hugging me or kissing me or anything like that. I am aware she carried me, but I could never touch my mother my entire life. And this was something I never told anybody. I could never physically touch her. And I didn't like being hugged by anyone. I didn't like actually being hugged by my grandmothers, which sometimes they would hug me. I didn't like being touched like that. And when my mother died, after she died, seconds after she died, I felt like, oh my God, her soul is leaving this earth. It's leaving this room. And I had to put my hand on her chest to tell her that I did love her. I just can't. I have this autistic thing with being touched. I can't do that kind of social interaction. So there was plenty of indications to the Social Security ALJ. Now, when I was very young, I couldn't make friends. And they didn't have daycare in those days, so I didn't go to daycare with a bunch of other kids. And usually, if anybody watched me, it would be usually my mother's mother, my grandma, and usually there were no other kids around. And my grandpa never hugged anybody either, neither did my father's father. So our family wasn't really one of social interaction and affection like that. Well, then my father, when I was maybe 4 years old or so, started having to get me a friend and invite this little girl named Kathy Ludwig, who lived on the same street we did, to play with me. Well, I couldn't really socially interact with her. She seemed like, I'm sure she was neurotypical. And I could not form any connection with her. But my father had her come over all the time. He took her on a trip to Virginia with me when I was 6 years old by paying for her way so she could have a good time. And we would kind of parallel play, not interact with each other, but do some of the same thing, like bury my father in sand or hop over rocks. But the reason that the connection, the only commonality we had was that my father kept saying, well, Mary, you like yolks and Kathy likes egg white, so you're friends. Well, not exactly. But when I did go over to her house once or twice, like around Christmas, I really, really liked her under the Christmas tree nativity scene because it had lots of sparkles and lots of little flickering sparkles and reindeer. So then I still didn't have any friends or anything. When I went to kindergarten, nobody would be my friend. Same thing in first grade. Nobody would be my friend. I'd get lost going to the classroom, and then I'd get laughed at. And anytime the teacher said, let's join little groups and do something, I'd stand there and stand there and stand there, and nobody would pick me. So the teacher would have to shove me into a group and say, you guys will be a group. And so, right from the get-go, I couldn't socially interact. I was perceived as weird and odd by all my peers. And in second grade, it got worse. In third grade, one of the girls who was taking gymnastics and could twirl on bars, because I used to go over to the bars myself and twirl on bars by myself, she would come over and try to interact with me and show me that she could twirl on bars. And not only that, was taking gymnastics and could do back handsprings and series of them and all sorts of things. But we couldn't really connect because I tried gymnastics. My parents tried to take me to gymnastics, and it hurt me because the balance beams were hardwood. They hurt my head, they hurt my neck, they hurt my shoulders, they banged my knees. And when they tried to get us running and doing the preliminaries to vault on the horse, it was very scary, and I was very clumsy, and I couldn't get the timing. And so for me, gymnastics didn't last long. And other than watching people do gymnastics who can do it well, it wasn't very appealing for me personally. And so then I wasn't having any friends and wasn't having any friends. And then my parents, my father mostly, signed me up for ballet lessons, thinking I'd get friends there. Well, I wasn't very good at it, and the only part of it I liked is when they allowed me to do toe, because I could walk on my toes. I liked that part, but I didn't have any natural kind of a talent for ballet, and I couldn't remember the sequence of steps, and I didn't really like their recitals. And so my father paid for a friend to come with me to ballet, and she was tall and thin, and she was oohed and awed right from the beginning, as she could have a lot of potential to be a ballerina. Well, I was just shuffled to the side, and we really didn't connect over that, and we didn't go out of our way to be friends. And so eventually I quit. In third grade, I started going to the boys' playground because the girls were like mocking me and bullying me and ridiculing me and laughing at me, and they wouldn't be friends and they wouldn't interact. So I'd go to the boys' playground because the boys were oftentimes playing softball or kickball, and I liked doing that. And I was good at kickball. So I'd go over there, and then I'd get in trouble for not staying on the girls' playground all the time. So then we moved to East Lansing in Michigan, and I was in fourth grade. And then I had a horrible experience with my fourth grade teacher. She was really not a nice person. The first thing she did was she decided she was going to get skeletons and have us put them together, and forced me into a group with 3 other people. And I think we got a cat skeleton or something like that. And I'm really good at embedded figures and block design, which is always an autistic strength. It was an autistic strength on Dr. Castle's WAIS-R test of me. And so I put the cat skeleton together like in no time at all, and we were done. And the other kids in all the other groups hadn't even started yet. And the other 3 kids in my group were upset. I upset them because I wasn't socially interacting, and I just took the whole thing over and I put it together, and they didn't even know where to start with the first bone. So then my fourth grade teacher got really upset because he kept trying to force me to socialize and this and that, and I couldn't understand social cues. I couldn't interact with these kids. I would go into the bathroom for extended periods of time at recess, so I didn't have to interact with them. If I was out on the playground, I just sat over at the edge. Nobody would play with me. And when I was about 5 years old, my grandmother decided that she should send me next door to play with and make friends with this little girl named Diana that lived next door. Well, the first thing Diana tried to do is she wanted to pull out her Barbies and I guess have them have conversations and do all these things. Well, I wasn't at all interested in that, because when I got Barbie dolls, I just lined them up. And I also cut their hair like I trim horses' manes. So I give them all the same haircut, line them up. So I didn't make friends very well with her because I lined up her Barbies and I cut their hair, and she didn't want to be my friend anymore. And so my grandmother tried to force me to go over there on other occasions, and she didn't want to play with me, and I didn't want to play with her. And so that was that. And so then in fourth grade, I got moved to a different elementary school because of this run-in with this fourth grade teacher. And I was kind of a new kid over there, but but there weren't the bullying groups yet against me, and it was only a couple months, so I was able to get through that, but I didn't have any friends. It was so far away across the city. Of course, nobody wanted to come to my house, which is fine. Nobody invited me to their birthday parties or to their house, which was fine, because I would go home and I'd stay alone in my room and I'd play records, the same record over and over and over again. And I would get magazines and cut out pictures of horses, and I make horse collages, and I put horses on my bedroom wall, and that's all I thought about was horses. And then we went into 5th grade and 6th grade, and in 5th grade we started playing these kind of playground games where you had to have 3 other people and you play these ball games. I never knew how to play them, because I didn't know what to do with the ball and who to pass it to or anything. So that didn't work out very well. And then again, another thing that happened was starting with my cousins, Kim and Jimmy, when I was about 5 years old. The only thing they wanted to interact with me about was they ran and followed me to the bathroom. They pulled their pants down, showed me what boys do. And then that happened again when I was 7 or 8 or 9 years old with the next door neighbor. My parents tried to send me over to be friends with him, Jimmy Mahoney, and that's all he wanted to do is go into his tree fort and pull down his pants and show me and then, so I definitely was socially interacting. I didn't know how to make friends. I never sought out friends on my own. And so then we moved. Well, now my parents tried to cultivate a friendship with me, with my next door neighbor, Linda, who was 2 years older than me. And we formed an interaction around my special interest horses, because my mother would take her with me when I went out to ride my horse Possum and handle the little foal they bought me. And Linda, this other young horse named Pixie, or would handle her anyway. She wanted to buy her and her parents wouldn't go for it. And so I had a somewhat friendship that was sort of cultivated by my parents, actually, with this girl Linda, and then it was around my special interest. And then they tried to cultivate me to have a friendship with a girl across the street named Jeannie. Well, Jeannie was very verbal and very neurotypical, and Jeannie started writing me pen pal letters. Well, I could never write pen pal letters because I can't write, and it would take me 3 to 4 months to do a 2-page pen pal letter response, and so very quickly that fizzled. And then we moved to New York. And the first 2 days, we were at the new house in New York on the street, Great Oaks Lane in Purdy Station, New York. Something went out in the road, like a ball or something, and I went out to get it. And I didn't seek out meeting the kids in the neighborhood. But suddenly I see them about 50 feet away from me, all the kids in the neighborhood. They have their arms crossed. They're standing in a line, and they start going, "Hey, retard, hey, retard, hey, retard." And that was my introduction to the kids in my neighborhood. Well, we never really became friends, I would say. Although my parents tried to cultivate the girl next door, Nancy, to come ride horses with me. And she wanted free rides. So sometimes, again, around my special interest, she'd come take a ride. But the number of days of all the years I lived there that I probably had a so-called friendship interaction with her was maybe 5 days. And her brother, Billy, he tried to really injure me on his snowmobile. He invited me to go on a snowmobile ride with him out in the cow field behind us. And there was a ditch through it. It was all covered in snow. And he went there about 60 miles an hour and he hit the edge of the bank of the ditch. and threw me out of the snowmobile, and I got really injured, and he was just laughing at me. And then he took off with the snowmobile. So much for social interaction and making friends there. And one of the kids was about 3 or 4 years older than us, Kevin. So he didn't really interact with me at all because he wasn't really my age group. And he lived alone in the house at the end of the road. And then there were these 2 girls and a boy. The boy was in my class. They lived across the street. And they really didn't like me. And they'd pretend to, oh, we like her. But they didn't really like me. And they were pretty mean to me most of the time. And then there were 2 girls down where the road went around a bend. And my father paid for them to come on vacation to Florida and other things to try to, again, make a friend for me. And I didn't go to make friends with them. And we didn't dislike each other, but we weren't great friends or how to make friends either. Just kind of a neutral thing. Okay, he's inviting them over, so I'm told I have to get along, so okay. And so that's kind of what went on. And in high school, yearbook pictures where I'm surrounded by my class. I'm standing there going, like, don't touch me. I don't like the crowd around me. I don't like you touching me. And so I didn't have very many friends in middle school or high school. In 7th grade, I was pulled out in homeroom by the teacher and made to write on the board and repeat something like thousands of times because I didn't say it right. In 8th grade, a bunch of girls lured me out on the playground, at which point a bunch of boys jumped out from behind building corners and started assaulting me and ripping off my clothes. They ripped my clothes off me. And then I see about 40 of my classmates, girls, boys, 7th and 8th grade, and teachers all up in the upper window laughing at me, pointing at me, mocking. And that's kind of the environment at my school, so I didn't really make friends there either. And so we went into high school, and I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there. I really couldn't. And so we did the 9th grade, and we did the 10th grade, and I really didn't have very many friends. My parents tried to get me in band class. Okay. Well, I didn't get to play the instrument I wanted to play. I did learn how to play the instrument they made me play, which was a flute, somewhat. They tried to sign me up for band with the flute. I believe it was when I was in 6th grade. I didn't make any friends there. And I hated the band. It was like too loud. And so it didn't take me very long at all to quit that, even though it was supposedly a big honor to be invited to play on the city band. So then, because I couldn't wait to get the hell out of the high school, and I started going to horse shows because that was my special interest, and I was pursuing horse riding and horses, because that was my special interest. That's all I talked about. That's all I thought about ever since I was about 6.5 years old. And so I wouldn't be in school on a Friday or a Monday because on Friday we had to get ready and leave for the horse show. On Monday I was just wiped out from the Sunday of the horse show and just got home and had to crash because I had kind of shut down from it being too social environment. Not that I had lots of friends or anything like that. I didn't really have friends. There were some superficial acquaintances, especially a couple girls that I thought rode pretty well, but didn't really have friends. And so I went to summer school between what would have been 11th grade and took a math class to give me enough credits to skip a grade. So I went straight from 10th grade into 12th grade. And at 12th grade, at least somebody ate lunch with me finally. The first time throughout all of my school in the cafeteria. There were 2 twin girls that were kind of misfits that nobody would sit with. A girl that had been in my band class that I think she felt sorry for me, so she would sit at her table. and a woman's liver who wanted to be a lawyer, Suzanne. And I think she was off-putting to a lot of other people because she was very woman's lib. And so our little group would sit at a table to eat lunch, but it wasn't really like we had a friendships or anything. It was kind of more like we were fellow misfits and refugees. And then I graduated high school. So I didn't have much social interaction at all. I didn't really ever make friends. So from the earliest moments of my life, well, neurotypical people were all making friends and had peers and had multiple friends and had social groups and had friend groups and all this. I never had that experience. So, and I also want to mention when I first started riding with my trainers, Ronnie and Susie Much, and I started riding with them on my horse Morning Mist at the Sussex County Horse Show in Branchville, New Jersey, and that was like in 1973. And my parents, we weren't wealthy, so they couldn't really afford my own hotel room for me. And my parents were not going to stay down at the horse show. My father almost never came to my horse shows, but my mother did sometimes. And I'm talking about later in this era. I mean, before that, she used to go to the horse shows with me and drive me there. But now in 1973, I could drive myself. So she had to work and she couldn't come be at the horse show all week. And so I couldn't afford a hotel room by myself. So somehow she found out from my trainers that I could share a hotel room that a whole bunch of the riders that were at the show with them had. And so here again, I don't know how to make friends. I don't know how to fit in. And so I would say there were probably about 8 or 9 other girls sharing this one hotel room. And when I went to horse shows, I was very used to, unless I was braiding manes, getting to bed and sleeping all night and then getting up early in the morning. And so the first thing that happens when she drops me off is she drops me off, my mother, at this hotel room that all these other girls had. They all had neurotypical normal suitcases and things like that. That's not how my mom packed my things. She got a great big giant clear garbage bag and just threw all my stuff in there, which some of my stuff, I guess, to the other girls looked weird and odd. And I certainly didn't fit in because that's how I arrived. And so, okay, we're in this hotel room and they all got suitcases with their clothes folded in it. And they've been going to horse shows together and they've all been having a room together. And I'm the new girl. And I don't fit in because I have this great big clear garbage bag packed full of stuff just dumped in there like a mess. And so I get ready to go to sleep like at about 10 o'clock that evening after taking care of my horse at the show. I get back to the hotel room and then all the girls decide that they're going, a whole bunch of them, in and out and in and out, and they're partying and in and out. And then they're being loud and in and out and bright lights on and bright lights on. And this is going on till about 3 in the morning. And I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I can't sleep. And then finally, when they do come to try to go to sleep, they're all in bed and they're all talking among each other. And they're talking loud and I can't get to sleep. And that was, oh my God, a sensory nightmare. I didn't understand all this social group interaction. And it was just like a complete shock to my system. And I was trying to be friendly and trying to get along with them and trying to see if I could sort of fit in. And like, no. I definitely was odd and weird and I definitely didn't fit in. So, at many other horse shows in the future, I would sleep in my vehicle or in a braiding stall or somewhere because that social group hotel room thing, it didn't work for me because I'm autistic. Another thing I want to mention is, even in those few instances where around my special interest, I made sort of a special interest friend, I didn't really know how to maintain the friendships. So that's a whole nother problem. I continued the only thing I could do was my special interest had been trained by going to horse shows and competitions and riding with top trainers. And that was my life. So I couldn't earn money doing anything else. I braided horses at some horse shows to try to pay my expenses to get to the show or have food to eat. And my father started really pushing me, telling me I had to go to school and be a computer science major. And I had to get a job. So one of the girls that rode with one of my trainers said, "Oh, well, I can get you a job at the supermarket where I work. It's in the meat department in the freezer section where they carve up and package the meat." So I didn't know anything about that. My father said, "You're going." So it was a long way away. It was about 45 minutes away. So I actually didn't make as much as it cost me to go there and come home. I worked there maybe not even a week. And because I can't regulate my temperature, I have interoception problems. I got terrible flu or cold or something from being in that freezer, and I had to quit. And every moment of that job was sensory torture, the bright lights, the horrible smells, and the freezing cold, and I couldn't do it. And so my father kept saying horses are an ass, and horses are a horse's patootie, and you need to go to college and become a computer science major, and that's the only thing that's any good, and that's the only thing that matters. And he didn't care at all about my special interest, really. And you have to get married, and you have to have kids, and this whole parental pressured spiel. Now, my parents caused a lot of problems for me because they were both master's mathematics majors, and they thought that if they started pushing me as a baby, do math, to read, to do all this stuff, that they could make me a genius. And they pushed and pushed and pushed, and I didn't have the mental capacity to do the math. I couldn't think that way, and I could never do it. And I couldn't use the language that way. And I'll do another video on that, because my mother would probably call it hyperlexia. I'm not sure if it was hyperlexia or not, and I'll get into that in another video. But my father was pressuring me to go to college and become a computer science major. Well, I couldn't think that way either. I wasn't him. And what his interest was not my special interest. And he did push me to get married. I'll get into that in another video. And pushing me to fit in and be neurotypical and meet neurotypical expectations and neurotypical standards, it was just disastrous advice. And I did have an early autism diagnosis, but they chose to hide it from me. They chose not to tell anybody because my family didn't go to doctors. It was in an era, you can read about it in the case of Tennessee v. Lane, 541 U.S. 509, 2004, about this terrible history that we've had in this country, and people were afraid. So they didn't talk about their child's disabilities because that was just, we don't talk about that. That's taboo. We don't go to doctors. And we don't tell the schools. We don't tell anybody. And that really caused a lot of problems in my life. What they did do is everything that I did that was weird, that was different, like in order for me to think about what I'm going to say and to remember it, because I script it out, and in order to listen to what somebody else is saying, I can't look somebody in the eye. I have to look away. And so that was no good. You're not paying attention. You have to look people in the eye, and then they would put my head straight at people to look in the eye, and I couldn't look in the eye. And I flapped my hands a lot. There's a video of me early on in my channel on the Capitol steps when I was 6, flapping my hands on the U.S. Capitol steps. Oh, no, I'm not allowed to do that. So I'd twirl my hair and I'd chew on my hair. Oh, I'm not allowed to do that. They'd pull that out of my mouth. And then another one is I like to go like that. I do that all the time. I do that all the time now. But I wasn't allowed to do that. They'd pull that out of my mouth. And I'd chew pencil erasers. So they'd throw those pencils away and get me new pencils. And I used to chew up every blanket I had, every towel. They take those away from me. Oh, no, you can't let people see that. Oh, no, you have to fit in and you have to be normal. And then when I couldn't interact with people, they tried to get to be my friends. They say, oh, no, you have to talk to that person. You have to, when they talk to you, you have to talk to them and all that. And usually I was treated like I was really weird, or like that little girl Diana with her Barbie dolls, like outright didn't want to be friends with me because I didn't know how to play with the Barbie dolls right. And that upset her. So this constant telling me I'm not okay as I am. And when I'd cover my ears, they'd pull my hands down and just subject me to this torture. When I go to my grandparents' house, they'd always have these Christmas dinners or Thanksgiving dinners or sometimes one in the summer. And I couldn't wait till everybody was done to get away from this crowded table and everybody talking loud and the loud bright lights. Oh, I wasn't allowed to do that. I was really happy when they didn't have enough seats and they set me way over in the corner with a little card table by myself. I really liked that. And then I'd excuse myself and go outside. And it was just this constant, you can't do that. You have to hide that. You can't be seen doing this. You can't be seen doing that. And when I couldn't take the smells and run screaming out of the room, then I'd get punished. You can't do this. You can't do that. We're going to take away your ballet lesson. We're going to take away your dog obedience school. We're going to take away your swimming lesson. We're going to take away, you're going to the horse to ride your horse and see your horse. And so I was constantly being forced to not be my autistic, authentic self. And anytime that I was odd or weird in school, I'd get sent to the principal's office, who'd then send me to the guidance counselor. And ultimately, when I asked the guidance counselor to write something for me to try to get into college much later in my life, one of the things he wrote was that I was just completely occupied with my horses as my parents hurtfully divorced, and that my whole life was horses. So it just was this constant thing about I wasn't accepted for who and what I was. I couldn't authentically act the way of my authentic self. And in every time there was a social situation, here's some more of them. I went to camp at Consumers Ed Camp, and I must have been about 8 or 9 years old. And so because the other kids didn't make friends with me and I couldn't socially interact with them, the girls ganged up behind my back and talked among each other and gossiped and decided we play this game Red Rovers. So you're lined up in 2 lines. And they decided that they were going to send me over because the other side hold hands. And they had a whole bunch of bigger, stronger people that were very strong and very physically violent. And they decided they're going to send me over first. So what you do in the game is the other side says, Red Rover, send so-and-so over. And so they'd volunteer me, and they take their hands and push me out and make me go running to the other side. And I was naive. I didn't know. I thought, oh, can I fit in? Can I get some acceptance from them if I go? Will they accept me? So I would go running over there, and the other side would take their arms where they join hands, and they'd go wham! And they'd hit me in the face, and I'd get bloody noses and knocked out on the ground and just physically assaulted and battered. And so these are the kind of social interactions I would have. Also in school, there was a play, and we all had to play a part in it. And so they thought when I laughed, it was odd and weird the way I laughed. And oftentimes, the only way I could fit in is to constantly smile. So my only reaction to anything usually is to smile. Even if something terrible happens, I kind of smile, and sometimes I laugh because I don't know what else to do. And it makes me very anxious, so it makes me laugh. And then I get punished for doing that. And so they decided to take all the other roles in the play and leave only one that I got assigned to. I had to be the witch in Hansel and Gretel. And then they started calling me the witch all over school. The witch, there's the witch. And so this is the kind of social interaction and stuff I was subjected to in school because I was autistic and I wasn't allowed to fit in. And I couldn't, they were trying to train me to mask. That's true. Over and over again. Over and over and over and over. Creating lots of trauma because I couldn't fit in and I couldn't fully mask. There were things I could not fully mask. One of them is how I read and write. I couldn't fully mask that. I couldn't fully mask covering my ears or running out of a room when there was terrible smells and bright lights and I'd shield my face. What are you doing? What's wrong with you? I couldn't fully mask all those things. And so there was just this constant thing like this. And then I was out of school, and the only way, because I couldn't get a job, no matter what I tried to do, I couldn't get a job, and I didn't have this math ability, so every time my father said, well, why don't you do this little computer job for me, and I'll hire you to do this, I couldn't do it because I couldn't figure out the technology, I couldn't figure out the math, I couldn't figure out the computer coding, I couldn't figure any of that out, so it never worked out. So then what happened is I was riding and training horses and stuff like that, and they didn't teach me anything about relationships. They didn't teach me anything about intimate relationships. My school didn't teach me anything about intimate relationships or opposite sex or anything like that other than diagrams of sperms and eggs. And that really wasn't enough. I never had any transition services, so I'll do a whole nother separate video on what happened with that. But I started being able to buy and sell some horses, but I couldn't get a barn to be able to board horses and give the riding lessons in. I was socially naive. I kept getting ripped off by people. I kept having my money stolen by people. I kept being told to get on killer horses that they knew had hurt a lot of other people, and then that I should train the horse. And then I sometimes I did. I was actually able to train these horses. Other times I also got hurt, and ultimately I would never get paid. And so at one point, which I'll cover in that other video about intimate relationships, I finally asked my mother and father to get me out of the situation I was in because I was getting hit in the head every day. I was getting beaten every day. And I had a little baby who was under 6 months old. And I was being cheated on, betrayed. And one of his girlfriends grabbed him around the waist and said, "Get your baby and flee." And that's exactly what I did. And my parents bought my mother plane tickets. She came and packed all my stuff up and drove me to California. And so I get to California, and my father starts telling me, okay, now you have to go to college, and you have to become a computer scientist, and have to get a job as a computer scientist, all this stuff like me. And I couldn't even organize my day. I couldn't cope with my sensory problems. I couldn't fit in with people. I didn't have any friends. I couldn't make social interactions. And I found a couple more places to ride and train horses. They didn't pay me. I was doing most of the hard work with the horses, risking my life to do it. Bad horses. I was getting a lot of compliments about how I was able to train horses. They weren't paying me. I started giving riding lessons, but I wasn't getting paid very much. And there's this whole thing about trying to put together finally my own business. I couldn't really get it off the ground because I didn't have boarding stalls. I didn't have a horse business and all this. And I'll go through all that. But finally, my father didn't tell me that he was ordered by a court to pay for all of my college education because I was autistic. So he told me to take out student loans, him and my stepmother. He invited me to live in their house to get me to California, promised me to buy me a real horse farm so I could teach riding lessons if I brought my infant daughter. I'll do more videos about that. I did do that. They threw me out of their house. They made me homeless in my car. I had police come along and knock on the window and say, you can't park here. You can't park here in your car. You can't sleep in your car. Customers I was giving riding lessons to, I'd go park my car out in their vineyards and sleep out there at night because I didn't have any place to live. And I continued working with horses, but eventually I decided to try to go to college. So I applied to a bunch of colleges. And when I was in high school, they didn't regard me as college material because I was autistic. So I didn't get in New York a Regents diploma. And I wasn't cultivated and helped to go to college. So I only got a general diploma, and I didn't meet the admission criteria for most colleges. But the University of San Francisco decided to admit me on probationary status. And once I got there and started taking classes, I noticed that the students that really seemed to be able to do the work were like Indonesian and Malaysian. So I tried to work with them to try to see if I could overcome the probation status and like get admitted full time. And they helped me. I wasn't really able to make friends, I wouldn't say, but they came from a different culture. So they didn't really judge me the same way as neurotypicals in the United States for not being able to fit in. They helped me. And so I went to college. I went to law school. I didn't really have very many friends. I did have sort of somebody who tried to be my friend. It would be over a common interest, like the honors program, or going to law school, and she became a legal secretary because she couldn't go to law school because she had to take care of her elderly mom. Things like that where there was a common interest. So I still never really could fit in or make friends or do the social interaction. But because I kept doing the homework and doing the assignments, and I wasn't really assaulted on campus, I wasn't assaulted and battered by anybody, so it's kind of like going to a tack shop or horse show. At least I felt like it was a safe place to go. So if I could go from my home to the school, then at least I felt like I could do that. So there's this whole lifetime of mine where I wasn't really making friends. I couldn't really do the social interaction. There were many awkward moments. I could never make it through the job interviews. The only thing anybody ever paid me to do was to give riding lessons or train horses or show their horses. In my entire life, that's the only thing they ever really paid me to do. Okay, I had, through the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, I had a job-supported job, but I was called retard. I was subjected to abuse by this other lawyer. I couldn't really do the job. He'd grab the work away from me and do it himself. I had to spend a lot of money on stuff to be able to do this job. And so this continued. I had a couple friends because they helped me break a pony. There was always around my special interest or a common interest that way. But we arrive at this, that people won't hire me in jobs. They won't hire me in jobs. I went to Fowler, White, Boggs & Banker in Tampa, and they hired me on paper for like a 2-month paralegal job. And when I showed up to report to work, they all took a look at my autistic face with the widespread eyes, joined hands in the lobby, and prayed to God someone else hire me because they weren't going to. I wasn't seen as having any value or worth, so it was okay to do this to an autistic mucky person because, after all, they have no feelings. This happened to me over and over again. I watched all my peers who graduated from law school. They got their bar admission right away. They got jobs right away. Some of them became judges. They had all these opportunities. I wasn't given any of those opportunities. I was always rejected. Even if I could do the work, I was always rejected. And the few places I tried to work, I was ganged up on. I was sabotaged in the work by other neurotypicals because I couldn't fit in. I couldn't do the small talk. I couldn't do social interactions. And so I'd have to go back to trying to ride and train horses again. And this is a whole lifetime of this. And so, of course, you're going to apply for your adult autism supports and services. It's an 86% national U.S. unemployment rate for autistic adults. And so I run into this ALJ here, who's like all the other judges I run into. They just see that you graduated college, that you graduated law school, that you passed a bar exam. And let me tell you, you don't have to be neurotypical and be able to understand social interaction or friendships. You can be autistic, even severely autistic, and yeah, you can pull off a law school degree. You can pass a bar exam. And then you're met with hostility and resentment because you cheapened their law degrees. They hate you for it. And you arrive at these judges who they make these assumptions that you have all these friends. Can't you find a friend to help you? Can't you find a friend to come here and help accommodate your disability with this court? Can't you find a friend to help you submit the paperwork and fill out the forms? Can't you have a friend help interpret for you? Well, no, Judge, I'm autistic. I don't have any friends. And it's just a horrible scenario. Just horrible. They start punishing you for this. And you get this ALJ. I don't see any social interaction, social cue problems, any problems making friends, any problems in your relationship. Well, okay. So what if I were allowed to be present at my Social Security ALJ hearing? And I had been able to ask this ALJ, well, Judge, how are you applying the Autism Spectrum Disorder diagnostic criteria for making friends, for social interaction, for being able to engage small talk, for reciprocal conversations and interaction, for relationships? How are you applying that to me and my life? Because she wouldn't have been able to answer it. Like all the other judges, she would have gone, and she would have short-circuited. And that's right. And that's what happens to us as autistic adults. And before there can be acceptance, there has to be understanding. So people in the neurotypical world that's not built for autistic people like me, they need to really understand what's happening. They don't want to be your friend. And, of course, my current husband, he shows numerous signs of being autistic. I believe that he is autistic. He's different than I am, but on some level, that's why we get along. And I'm just putting this video out here because autism is missed in girls and women. We are misdiagnosed. We are misunderstood. We are vilified for it. We are being forced to fit into a neurotypical world that's not designed for us. We're expected to buck up and take the noise assault or the light assault or all sorts of sensory smells we can't take. I actually lost a lawsuit because of my problems with being touched and grabbed by neurotypicals and the textures of my clothing and stuff. I was set for a mediation by the Honorable Susan Bucklew in a lawsuit I brought in 2003 for violations of my rights under Title II of the American with Disabilities Act, and without addressing how I feel that my rights were violated in other parts of the case. The one thing the Honorable Judge Bucklew did is she set my claims against the city of Clearwater for mediation. So the mediator that got assigned, he was the top of the Florida bar. He had decades of experience, all the bells and whistles, all the perfect background. He was very esteemed, but I was sitting in the lobby with my husband waiting for the mediation, and I'm autistic. And he came along, and he grabbed my arm like this and tried to grab me with his arm around my back with a very bear hug. And it freaked me out, and I pulled away. And I said, I can't go with you. I can't go with you into that room. Because he didn't have any autism training. And I have hypersensitivity to all sorts of things that are sensory. And so Judge Bucklew just dismissed my case, and I lost my case because of that. So there really needs to be more understanding. And that needs to lead to appreciation of our autistic differences. And it needs to lead to an acceptance of autistic people as equally valuable people, equally valid people. We are not second-class citizens. We do have feelings, and it's wrong to treat us like this. And we can't get acceptance if there's no understanding. And so that's my video for this afternoon. If you like my videos, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. And thank you for watching.